morning, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the launch of Mobility Outlook, India's first multidimensional, multimodal media platform for all things mobility. It is indeed an honor to have with us today some of country's most eminent and influential voices in the mobility industry. We are deeply indebted to all our delegates as well who've connected with us on this exciting new journey. So let us begin by a formal introduction, welcoming our eminent panel of guests. We have with us today Dr. V. Sumantran, Chairperson, Celeris Technology, Mr. Dilip Chenoy, Secretary General FICCI, Ms. Rashmi Urdhwareshe, President SAE India, Mr. Vinay Sanghi, Founder and CEO of the Car Trade Group, and of course, Deepangshu Sarmah, Editor, Mobility Outlook. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Vinay to share his views on his new venture.
Thanks, Sanika, and I just want to again welcome Mr. Dilip Chenoy, Dr. Sumantran, and Ms. Rashmi Urdhwareshe for being here, and thank you for being here. It's really good. It's a great time to be here for the launch of Mobility Outlook, a much needed initiative within the auto industry, and I'm proud that Carwale Bikewale family has put this together. The auto industry in the last year has been through complete turmoil, right? If you look at April and May last year, when transactions were at a complete standstill, and then the resilience the industry shown probably from June, July, August to get back into shape, get manufacturing back in order, from vendors, OEMs, and then of course the dealerships to get restarted and cater to all the consumers' needs. I'm very proud of being part of this industry, which is fought hard over the last year and shown the growth levels we've seen right from July, August up to March. So we should all be proud of being part of this whole auto industry. It's a very big part of the GDP of India and a significant contributor to the economy. So yeah, very proud that this initiative is getting launched, and especially in these times. If you really look at the next 10 years for the auto industry itself, there's just so many changes being talked about, right? In fact, if you look at the last 100 years, the auto industry has really changed very minimally. But if you look at the next 10 years, there's so many changes expected. People are talking about clean energy is one big change, digitization of the entire journey, right from vendors to manufacturers to dealers to consumers, and the whole digital revolution around that part. There's a big talk about whether people want to own cars, owning shared ownership, financing moving to leasing. So many changes like to take place in the next 10 years. What better platform to have these discussions than Mobility Outlook, right? I think so. It's a fabulous initiative. I think just seeing what the industry is going to go through over the next 10 years, I'm pretty excited to hearing what happens on Mobility Outlook and on this platform. Just a little bit about the group itself. Car Trade Group is started in 2010. Some of our key initiatives, of course, Carwale, the new car brand, Bikewale, a two-wheeler brand. Both Bikewale, Carwale receive almost 30 million customers a month, unique customers a month. So really, voice of customer behavior consumer behavior comes from Carwale and Bikewale. Our auction businesses, where businesses auction, we auction almost 1 million vehicles a year. We inspect almost 1 million vehicles a year. Almost every new car dealer, used car dealer, bike dealer are really on our platform selling vehicles. I think one of our biggest objectives for the next few years is really creating a digital ecosystem where car or two-wheeler consumers or vehicle consumers, dealers, car manufacturers, banks are all linked up and connected with each other. And that's our endeavor for the next 10 years, building a whole digital automotive ecosystem. Very happy to be here once again. Congratulations to the entire team which has put this together. And yeah, let's look forward to the next 10 years together.
Thank you so much, Vinay. As always, it's a delight listening to you. So moving on, here's a quick look at what we have in store for you today. Can we please play the AV for the Mobility Outlook? that's a wide range of topics. Seems like Team Mobility Outlook is going to be very busy this time. Why not hear more about it from the editor himself, Deepangshu Dev Sarmah?
Thank you, Sanika. We indeed have a lot on our plate. Greetings, everyone. Many years back, as a student of a school that's run by Ramakrishna Sevasram, I had the great privilege to actually learn a lot of these teachings by Swami Vivekananda. One of the most profound thoughts that stayed with me through my life is what he said about ideas and dreams. He had said, take up one idea, make that one idea your life. Think of it, dream of it, and live on that idea. For the past few years, I've actually been living such a dream that is built on one idea, an idea to build a media platform that brings together every element of the mobility ecosystem all at one place. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the launch of Mobility Outlook, India's newest and only media platform that takes a holistic approach to the mobility universe. From automotive to aviation, from railways to maritime, from hyperloop to every solution that you can find in micromobility. When we look at the last few years, we have witnessed automotive transformation unlike anything in the past. And there's been a clear transition to a future that is going to be intelligent, smart, and sustainable. The past few years, we've also seen new business models emerge, and we've seen organizations re-strategizing their business objectives and goals. Take, for example, Toyota, who has committed to become a mobility company, or Hyundai, which has pledged to reorient itself as a smart mobility solutions provider by 2025. We've also seen the emergence of industry megatrends, connected, autonomous, shared, electrified, call it by any name, CASE or ACEs. It's fairly clear the path that the mobility sector is going to undertake. Young people and old are rethinking their need to buy vehicles. Mobility as a service is gaining ground thanks to the proliferation of connected technologies and the internet. On-demand ride services are becoming commonplace. And we also see big data and analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning becoming part of every decision in the automotive sector. From the vehicles from vehicles being the way we know them to being built for specific purposes, there's been a tremendous transformation that we see in the auto sector. And there, I believe, lies a lot of opportunity for the players in this sector. It is in the backdrop of these developments that we have conceived this new platform that provides readers with multidimensional insights into the mobility sector. At this stage, I would like to introduce our guests today, although none of them really need an introduction. However, it's my duty to introduce Professor Dr. V. Sumantran, Chairman of Celeris Technologies. He is that unique combination of a business leader, technocrat, academic, and author, having lived and worked in the US and Europe and Asia over a 30-plus year career. He's also an advisor to several Fortune 100 organizations in autos, technology, industrial equipment, and aerospace, and is the author of the book, Faster, Smarter, Greener, The Future of the Car and Urban Mobility, published by MIT Press in 2017. Dr. Sumantran is also an adjunct professor at MIT MISI and serves on the board of governors for the Indian Institute of Technology, Roper, and on the advisory board of the Fraunhofer Institute, Germany. He was a distinguished visiting professor at IIT Madras as well. Previously, he was executive vice chairman of the Hinduja Automotive UK, as well as the vice chairman of Ashok Leyland, India's second largest commercial vehicle maker. Prior to that, he was member of the board at Tata Motors and the chief executive officer of Tata Motors cars business in its formative years. Dr. Sumantran has also served on the Science Advisory Council of the Prime Minister of India and the Scientific Advisory Committee to the Cabinet of the Indian government. He has served on the Manufacturing Competitiveness Council of the Government of India and as chairman of the National Defense Council of the Confederation of Indian Industries. An alumnus of IIT Madras, he subsequently earned his MS degree from Princeton University and a PhD from Virginia Tech University in aerospace engineering, as well as a master's degree in management of technology. He is a licensed pilot and possesses an FIA racing driver's license as well. Dr. Sumantran, welcome. Our next guest is Mr. Dilip Chenoy, Secretary General at FICCI. His last full assignment before FICCI was when he served as Managing Director and CEO of the National Skill Development Corporation, NSDC, which is a public-private partnership whose objective is to foster private sector investment and initiatives in training and skill development. While at NSDC, Mr. Chenoy also served as co-chair of the Australia-India Joint Working Group on Skill Development. Currently, he is a member of the Board of Governors at IILM New Delhi, and also on the Board of Studies, All India Management Association. He's also Director General of ICC India and Indian Council of Arbitration. He advises startups, including organizations in the digital education, skills, and livelihood space. And he also serves on the executive committee of the Bureau of Indian Standard and is a director of Invest India. Prior to NSDC, Mr. Chenoy was the Director General of the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, SAEIM, and also served as a Deputy Director General of CII. He's a Fellow of the World Academy of Productivity Science. Mr. Chenoy, welcome. Our final guest today is Ms. Rashmi Urdhwareshe. She is the President of SAEIndia. And prior to this, she was the Director of the Automotive Research Association of India, ARAI. She had joined ARAI as a trainee engineer and rose to the post of director. Born in Nagpur to professor parents, she grew up to be an NCC cadet, a state-level bridge champion, an avid sports enthusiast at school, and also a trained sitarist. A postgraduate in electronics engineering from the College of Engineering, Pune, Mrs. Urdhwareshe opted for a research position in instrumentation at ARAI in 1983. She is a recipient of an UNDP fellowship, where she learned a systematic approach to R&D of projects, application of electronics in automotive, besides managing and leading a team at a renowned vehicle manufacturer's R&D center. Ma'am, welcome to Mobility Outlook. May I now request all our guests of honor today to announce the launch of Mobility Outlook website.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be a part of this dialogue and discussion commemorating the launch of Mobility Outlook as a digital platform. Very happy to be here.
Good morning. I am also equally happy and proud to announce the launch of this digital platform. Digital is the key for bringing people together, bringing resources together, and sharing of knowledge. Congratulations.
Good morning. It's a privilege to be part of this launch. Wish you all the very best, and look that this serves a niche in the mobility market going forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much for announcing the launch of Mobility Outlook, which is now live. Let me quickly take you through the website and the content that we would do. As you can see, there would be, and as you have seen in the inaugural video, we would have news, views, analysis, guest commentaries, conversations with industry captains, features, and also various knowledge-based articles. I'd request each one of you to kindly go through our website and see for yourself what we have in store. And all of this obviously won't be possible without the committed individuals who share the same vision. May we now have the AV to about Team Mobility Outlook, please.
Mobility Outlook is being brought to you by a team with extensive experience of covering the automobile and aviation sectors, collectively bringing in over 60 years of relevant experience. Mobility Outlook is led by Deepangshu Sarmah as its editor. He brings over 2 decades of experience in the B2B/professional space and believes in creating new age solutions to deliver content in a pragmatic and meaningful way. Veteran auto journalist T. Murli joins Mobility Outlook as its managing editor. And avid photographer, his passion spreads across auto, aviation, railways, and all things mobility. Deepangshu Tomar is the assistant editor at Mobility Outlook. After 9 years of covering the auto sector, he is all set to spread his wings across other domains of the mobility universe. The youngest member of the team, Srinjoy Bal, has joined us as a correspondent. A journalism and mass communication graduate, he aspires to amalgamate his passion with his profession and become a credible automotive journalist. And finally, we have Atul Chandra, our editorial consultant, who brings in wide knowledge and experience of covering the aerospace and defense sectors for over a decade.
Thank you. All of us are aware of this famous Chinese proverb ascribed to Lao Tzu, which says, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." This, ladies and gentlemen, is our first step to focus on, to take a deep dive into, and cover the mobility ecosystem as one integrated piece. I thank you once again for being part of this launch program today, and which is a momentous occasion for each one of us in the car trade crew. Let us now head straight into the discussion that we have lined up on the subject subject that we have today, which is transitioning into a sustainable future and India's role. So may I begin with Dr. Sumantran, your initial comments on the subject and the platform that we have today, mobility as a whole.
Thank you. Actually, this is a true story, not made up for this occasion. About 6 years ago, I'd stepped off most of my full-time corporate roles and board roles to start to look at what the future of the auto industry would be. I wanted to write a book with MIT in Boston. But very quickly in the research, we found out that, frankly, there was no point in writing a book just about the auto industry. The whole industry was itself transforming so rapidly into what should be mobility. And so we changed our focus to really write this book about the future of the car and urban mobility, because that was the only relevant topic of discussion that we could see from our research across global regions. And the reason why we said this is going to be particularly relevant for the urban context is that, by the middle of the century, 4 out of every 6 persons on the planet will be in urban spaces. So we have to deal with the urban context where people are going to be increasingly living their lives and going to work. And if you look at urban priorities today, across the world, no matter where you are, the urban priorities are how do we have clean air in our cities? We know this is a critical issue in India. How do we make better use of very valuable real estate? The typical car that occupies 10 or 15 square meters of land space occupies land that could be worth $500,000 if you're in New York or London or Paris. That's very expensive real estate. So you've got to find ways to share the space. We've heard about congestion, the fact that cities can't take any more cars or even two-wheelers. And finally, we've had a lot of research from around the world saying the average car is used for about 5 or 6% of its time. So 95% of the time, an expensive asset is idle. So if you take the 3 elements together, if we as a society across the world have to find better ways to share the carbon footprint, meaning share the fuel and the greenhouse gas emissions, to share the real estate and the space, and to share the economic asset, you have to find convergence of all of this. And this forces one to start to think about mobility as a solution, not just the car. And this is not surprising, because if I ask any one of you, how often do we use the word telephone anymore? We don't use the word telephone very much anymore. We use smartphone, we use I'll WhatsApp you, let's do FaceTime. And this is the transformation of what used to be a telephone into such a wide variety of communication aids. So there is no reason to believe going forward that the definition of mobility will be anchored just by the definition of what an automobile is. So we began to see in this book, and we created a framework for this, to saying very likely the future of people moving about would require multimodality, which means everything from, on some journeys, you might prefer to just walk, micromobility, as Deepangshu suggested, all the way to everything from shared rides and travel on a metro rail, for example. Highly connected, because these are all going to be very well connected to each other. Intelligent, because we're going to employ intelligence both in the tools that we have in our pockets, namely the smartphone, tools we have in our vehicles. The amount of intelligence and software in vehicles is huge, and intelligence that we will deploy in city infrastructure and systems. We will all expect very personalized services. How I travel to go out for dinner with my wife on a Sunday evening will be different from how I want to go to work on a Monday morning. So it has to be personalized to the individual and the context. So if you put all this together, there is no reason why we would continue to anchor our definition of transportation around just the automobile. And it is just as we've made the transition in communication, going from telephones to such a wide, rich variety of communication, we will make the transition to go from thinking about the car to a very rich, very productive, and hopefully sustainable spectrum of solutions in mobility. So I think let me stop here, because this is an important, and I commend Mobility Outlook and Car Trade to have launched this initiative. It's a very timely transition to a new dialogue with new vocabulary. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Sumantran. Truly appreciate your initial comments. I will come to you, Mr. Chenoy. Your initial first comments on the subject that we have for discussion today.
Thank you, Deepangshu, and it's really a pleasure to be here at the digital launch of Mobility Outlook by the group. I think, I just want to take off from where Dr. Sumantran left, right? So the two things have happened to shift the needle, if I may to use that word, in terms of mobility and sustainability during the pandemic. The first is that, we have actually found alternate ways to work. So whether it is getting to work on Monday morning, the need to go to work, the need to be mobile is kind of being questioned. And therefore, the need for a certain type of transportation to go to work is being looked at. Second, the whole era of transporting goods and services has, taken a leap forward into contactless delivery, contactless payments, and a lot of other new innovators and new innovations during the pandemic. And shared seems to be the way forward. And if you look at it, and therefore, if you look at sustainability in the context of transportation, many initiatives taken by the government, whether it is the National Urban Transport Policy, the National Electric Mobility Plan, the National Mission on Transformative Mobility and Battery Storage, long-term National Transport Policy, the FAME scheme, the faster, adoption of manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicles in India. These all aim to deliver and develop a cleaner transport system and control and enhance sustainability in it. There is also now talk about, net carbon zero impact here going forward. But what actually has happened in the past 1 year, right? We are slightly 1 year plus in the lockdown, is that everybody is questioning which are the parts as we move to the new normal, which are the parts of the old normal that we want to continue taking forward, and which are the ones that we want to leave behind. And I think the general agreement is that sustainability and green is something which we want to push for going ahead. From FICCI's point of view, and looking at the process of mobility and climate, the Paris process that is there, They actually released the global macro roadmap for decarbonization of the transportation sector, followed by country-specific roadmaps. FICCI had led the development of the India roadmap for a low-carbon sustainable mobility with the Paris process and the WWF India and Shakti Foundation. And the roadmap, we launched it in June of last year, so less than a year ago, by the Minister of Transport, Shri Nitin Gadkari. And I think there were 9 key messages, and I'll end with those 9 key messages. The first one was that we need to rebuild the governance structure, which is central to integrated planning of the city and state levels, keeping in view the, what we learned during the pandemic. We have to shift the paradigm, and I think Dr. Sumantran also talked about it, for building infrastructure to move vehicles, to build infrastructure to minimize the need for movement of people and to focus on the movement of people. To incentivize usage rather than ownership of vehicles, which is a very interesting thing. To integrate multiple modes of transport for people and goods for seamless mobility. Currently everybody and the whole transport infrastructure doesn't talk to each other. But during the COVID, because it was contactless, because it was seamless, a lot of integration happened, and we should not lose that going forward. To focus on transit-oriented development and last-mile connectivity. And of course, then to use sustainable fuels, renewable-based electricity in transport. And in the budget this year, they talked about the green hydrogen mission, which is there. To integrate climate adaptation aspects into urban and transport planning. 8th, to put in place financial and economic instruments that can facilitate the transition to a low carbon and sustainably mobility transport options in the country. And of course, promote research into new and advanced technologies, including intelligent transport systems. So I think the roadmap recognizes the need for government, private sector, other stakeholders to work together. And I think any effort that digitally connects these stakeholders, such as yours, is actually going to enable this sharing of information, this collaborative effort going forward. So I think let's stop here at this point of time and then respond to any other questions that you have. Once again, congratulations and thank you for having me here. It's great meeting up again with Dr. Sumantran and Rashmi ji. And you, of course. I think we've known each other for a long time. So thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you, Mr. Chenoy. I appreciate your initial comments. I'll come to you, Mrs. Urdhwareshe. Your first comments on mobility ecosystem and what India needs to do really.
Sure. Thanks, Deepangshu. And I do agree with all the points that have been put forth by Dr. Sumantran first and Dilip later on. I would like to add to the sustainability portion of it. And when I define sustainability, I think we should look at 2 major aspects. One is the technology that will enable us to achieve what we are looking at, and the second is the economics or economical portion of it. And I don't, when I say economy, I don't think we should only focus on the commercialization or the commercial aspect of it. Economics is the cost to the society. That includes creation of new infrastructure, creation and maintenance of the existing infrastructure, utilizing it. And of course, society as such has to bear all those developmental and infrastructure costs. We also should look at the new concepts that are being talked about elsewhere in the world, such as circularity of economy. And that concept is not new to India. We have been so much used to utilizing our resources to the fullest. पूरा निचोड़ के जिस तरह से हम बात करते हैं, वो हम resources हमारी use करते हैं. But when it comes to sustaining the resources or sustaining the mobility, I think we should be mindful of the most important aspect, which is the energy. And good energy management is, in my view, the key. Dilip talked about it, and with the spread that we have of the energy, almost 66% at this moment is coming from the thermic energy, and majority of it is coming from the fossil fuels, as we know. And while of course we should have a clear roadmap of 10 years down the line for developing our sustainability solutions, we should align it with the national roadmap of energy management and renewable and green energy and its transformation or translation into carbon neutral energy is the key for sustaining electric mobility. Another aspect we should be mindful is the changing needs of transportation. And much was talked about in earlier previous comments. Due to pandemic, we have learned new things. It's not just public versus goods transportation or such, but we have also learned to go into the vertical space by using drones for for small goods transportation and services. That's where actually the integrated transportation comes, and I'm very happy that under SAE we have that kind of approach since many years. It has been in existence, and we have four verticals which will address development and sustainability of transportation. It also includes off-highway. I think let's not also forget about off-highway segment. We should be also addressing it very deeply because it is linked with the development of infrastructure as well, not just vehicular technology, but also off-highway development. So these are my initial comments, and again, once again, congratulations, and look forward to more discussions today and again in future.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. At this stage, I would also like to request all our delegates to participate in this discussion. You can use the Q&A, the platform that we have on this Zoom to send in your questions, and I'll try my best to get those across to our panel of experts. Dr. Sumantran, I'll come to you for a specific question. I mean, all of you have talked about the importance of getting all stakeholders to play their respective roles and also collectively. Now, when we're talking of a sustainable future, the integration of mobility stakeholders all coming together, working in a collaborative manner is of absolute importance. What would you say on that part?
No, I think the moment we accept that the problem we are trying to solve impacts the intersection of consumers, government, and essentially the representatives of society responsible for regulations and policy making, and of course industry players, whether it is OEM manufacturers of vehicles or deliverers or providers of services, could be Uber, for example. So I think this intersection is really what we have to start to look at. We have examples at two very extreme ends. You know, Los Angeles is a wonderful example of, you know, let the industry go ahead and do whatever you want, and we'll keep on building roads to catch up. I mean, this has been a disastrous trajectory. Los Angeles has the most roadway square kilometers per inhabitant. It has the most number of cars per capita, and it has the worst congestion and the worst air quality of any of the large cities. So it's not a trajectory that's taking us to a meaningful future. Then you start to see cities like Singapore and even London and increasingly Hong Kong and Tokyo. They have addressed this issue of how are you dealing with a lot of people. And this means that the dynamic between what society wants, a very proactive policy making and a regulatory regime, and the very quick adoption of the right kinds of technologies that serve this population. And most recently, Rashmi made a very important point. COVID has somewhat shaken up a lot of our assumptions going forward. So we've got a new set of filters and a new set of factors to consider as we re-architect mobility. And this one's going to be based around people proximity. Will people want to get into a crowded metro train or be in ride-sharing cars in close proximity with people? So this means, again, we should deploy technologies like micromobility, whether it's scooters, small micro cars. So this interplay between what consumers want, what society feels is for the good of society, and how do we play with the dynamics of technology. That dynamic is perhaps the most important thing.
Right. When you give an example of Los Angeles, Dr. Sumantran, and when we look at other global examples of what is right and what is wrong, what are some of the critical learning that you think that India could look at?
I think you've made a very important point. You see, this is the reason why urban planning and urban architecture becomes very important. We can't solve the mobility problem without solving the urban architecture and urban planning problem. When I said Los Angeles, my biggest fear is too many Indian cities are going down the trajectory of Los Angeles. We have very poor planning. There is uncontrolled sprawl, and people just go out of the boundaries of the cities continue to expand, and it's all literally unstructured expansion of the city boundaries. Many cities have recognized this problem and they've actually curbed it. London is a great example. They had the green belt around London and they said, we're going to force the densification of London. The moment you force densification, you're able to provide better quality infrastructure at better capital efficiency, which is why a city like Singapore can serve its citizens very well, because infrastructure is delivered with greater capital efficiency to such a population. Now, this is a very important thing that we have to learn in India. In fact, now this is, again, if I were to make it very topical and make it very current, this whole debate, now we're going to one more stage of this journey of urban planning after COVID. If you take Paris now, Paris is now wanting to talk about a 15-minute city. They want to make multiple clusters of economic and people concentration around cities. So it's almost like saying there would be multiple satellite cities wherein you will have most people live, work within those satellite cities, and there will be limited transportation required from that satellite city to outside. For example, I would use an airport maybe once in a month. But the rest of the time, I live, work, do the shopping, go to my hospitals, the children go to school, all within the satellite city. So all of this is a new way of looking at urban architecture and saying, can we find better ways to minimize the load on transportation, which is increasingly energy inefficient, and at the same time address all of these other concerns about people proximity, economic efficiency, and so on. So the Los Angeles model is certainly not a model for us to follow. Unfortunately, it is a model of default. When infrastructure does not anticipate demand, then we're going to have this problem. And in India, we are not like China. We can't say we will build infrastructure and then populate the region. We can't afford that kind of capital. So we have to be a lot more careful in planning, but being proactive with what planning needs to do.
Mr. Chenoy, I'll come to you with a similar question. I mean, you could possibly respond to Dr. Sumantran. And also, how do we undo certain developments that we've already undertaken as a nation? How do we correct those?
I think developments could be broadly classified into different categories. One is how we have built cities and or built towns and looked at zoning restrictions and land use restrictions. So if you look at Delhi, right, the current land use restrictions and zoning restrictions and all the things being done is saying that you can't have commercial establishments near residential things. Inadvertently, that leaves some people, if they want to even buy a loaf of bread, they have to travel a few kilometers, and it's not really sensible. So you have to relook at zoning regulations, relook at how we actually enable that. The 15-minute concept, as Dr. Sumantran said, we need to can we look at it? The second aspect is that we need to build social, educational, entertainment, and other infrastructure in close proximity to large residential hubs. And that will eliminate the need to travel for those. So, we need to rethink that going forward there. Also, if you're looking at densification, as like Dr. Sumantran said, then we need to look at new things of, floor area regulation, etc. There. So there's a whole aspect of town planning, land use allocation, capital allocation for infrastructure, as Dr. Sumantran talked about. We need to look at one of that. So how do we actually minimize the need for transport, right, and for movement? Do we look at neighborhood schooling, and that's a big challenge because the quality of schools vary, and I know how do we do that. So there is a lot of both physical engineering, if I may talk about, and social engineering that is required. The second aspect is in the forms of mobility, right? How do we move to, I mean, if you were to take a prime minister's thing of more crop per drop, how do we take more mobility per atom of carbon added, right? Or things like that. So you got to look at it with a fresh set of perspectives. Typically, when we look at mobility, we tend to focus on public transportation, green mobility, etc., and not look at the process of the manufactured of products and services that are used in mobility. So we need to re-engineer the way we look at it. So if you were to look at a vehicle, right, it is kind of manufactured from components that use green energy, that use recycled material, that use a zero carbon imprint for manufacture of components. The vehicle, whether it's a public transportation vehicle or a private transportation vehicle, is actually manufactured again using renewable energy, whole manufacturing system that is carbon neutral, water neutral going forward. And then the people use transportation in a manner using fuels that also impact that. So if you look at that goal, right, then the re-engineering that has to be done across the different elements of the mobility chain is hugely different. And again, the whole question of ownership versus usage, right? Technology can actually pay. I remember Dr. Sumantran was in SIM at that point of time when we made a statement. If you look at a bus, right? So a challenge is that a bus is having 40 odd seats. If it operates at less than 50% capacity or 60% capacity, you are actually not optimizing the use of it. If it is overloaded, then there's another issue like that. So with changes in the type of mobility that we have, and looking at the pandemic, and if you go back to the 1918 and 1920s, there is actually a photograph of a kind of a capsule with a person on 4 wheels moving. Now, if you imagine that was the fundamental building block of a bus, you and I could get into that capsule. You could actually go in to the road, link up with other capsules, peel off anywhere. So we have to rethink the concept of a vehicle and concept of mobility. And Hong Kong is a great example. I think Dr. Sumantran talked about Los Angeles. Hong Kong has a very interesting concept. They have people movers, right? So it is like, the road moves, right? Or the staircase moves up, right? It's like an escalator or something like that. So we need to look at, what are the different solutions and re-engineer the different solutions. Today, the road is stagnant, vehicles move on the road, right? So I think there are a lot of different things, and some of these ideas may seem outlandish. They might seem, out of a science fiction book, but I believe, and there might be someone on this call, there'll be some young kid, some group of young people, like the group at Carvala founded this institution, right? working on these solutions, which will dramatically disrupt the whole way that we look at it. And if you look at the automobile, right, traditionally people went to a tire garage to change. And if you look at every aspect of the automobile, there is somebody disrupting the traditional way that business is done. And that is key. And if this mobility solutions can actually build a whole round of discussions and get such people around the table to talk about it, then you will slowly start changing. So a lot has to change, whether it is in terms of policy, whether it is in terms of manufacturing, whether it is in the form of actual transportation. But it has to be done quickly, because I don't think we have the luxury of time going ahead.
Excellent points, Mr. Chenoy. I mean, you spoke about re-engineering, which is important. I mean, when we look at mobility as one aspect, the objective, like everyone talks about, is to move people and goods, right, and not to allow more vehicles on the road. So, if you're looking at that, and if you're looking at solutions that you talked about, Mr. Urdhwareshe, I'll come to you. You also talked about technology being an enabler, but we need multiple enablers, right? We know, like Mr. Chenoy pointed out, we need good policies, we need good manufacturing, we need good products, we need good innovative solutions to come in, and all these solutions can come in from every aspect. So therein, the startup ecosystem becomes important, the academia becomes important. Now, as the head of SAE India, how do you see this whole network coming together? We've also talked about collaboration to begin with. What is the role that SAE could play in bringing this together?
Yeah, a good point. I think we have been in past also tried to bring in together a comprehensive approach for utilizing the technology to the fullest. I'll tell one example which is related to bringing in ITS related infrastructure on vehicles. Our vehicles are quite intelligent. They are already capable of exchange of data, information amongst vehicle to infrastructure. We don't seem to be utilizing the fullest capacity or capability of this, what we have already introduced and what the user has already paid for. So there is a lot of space available, and I look at SAE or any such forum to be able to identify these gaps, to bring in a directional thought process, or even to encourage the startups to play their role in identifying these gaps and try to fill in. Also, we should be looking at different sectors. Not one solution fits all. We have public transport, we have urban transport, and we also have rural transportation, where the needs are entirely different. And that's where I think integrated transport management can happen, perhaps through SAE or through ASDC or through such forum. We can bring in resources together. Uh, Knowledge dissemination is one aspect altogether, but more so on the deployment of technology, utilizing the technology which is already in existence. That's, in my view, the biggest opportunity that exists today to be able to get the best out of what investment has already been done.
Thank you. What I'll do is I've been receiving quite a few questions from our delegates as well. I will take a few questions. Dr. Sumantran, there is a question for you from Mr. Tapas Chakraborty. He says, telephone to mobile or smartphone or WhatsApp, the journey took almost 1 decade, that too with a cost-effective, reliable, and advantageous solution. How do you see personal vehicle to an on-call vehicle movement systems? Similar reliability and convenience will happen, especially in the Indian context.
Well, when we talk about this transformation, and very importantly, when we talk about mobility, I think we must keep in mind that there is a full spectrum of solutions. Actually, one of the points we make in the book is you can't even talk about the mobility architecture for a city without decent pavements and sidewalks. If you want multimodal mobility to work, it starts with very simple things. Can people walk around? Too many of our cities have made it impossible for pedestrians to safely use roads. So it is not only a question of high tech, it's also a question of being sensitive to this combination of mobility requirements. The second example would be, this point is articulated very well by Enrique Peñalosa. He was a mayor of Bogota and a very famous urbanist. And he said, people seem to think that an advanced country is only a country where even poor people can go about by cars. But he said, really, a developed country is one where even the rich people take a bus or a train to work. And if you say, I can see poor people owning cars in, rural Texas, it's not a big deal. But when you look at Copenhagen or in Amsterdam, rich people are using public transit and walkways and bicycles. So I think we have to change a little bit of our mindset about what is progress, what is technology, and what is advancement of our environment. The second aspect of this is also going to be that the spectrum of solutions available means that some of these bicycles have been something that we have neglected. Non-motorized transport is an important element of the architecture of the cities I talked about, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and so on. It's not sophisticated to bring back cities into our Indian context. We used to have bicycles, used to be a very popular mode of travel in many cities. Somehow we followed the Chinese example and we've abandoned bicycles. We've got to make it fashionable again. Tesla made electric cars fashionable. Before that, we had, small little city cars and micro cars that were electric, and they were really not capturing the imagination. Tesla made electric vehicles fashionable. So now, fortunately, we have an opportunity to make bicycles fashionable, and not just plain bicycles, but bicycles with perhaps even electric assist. A whole range of solutions. So that's why when we imagine the full heterogeneity of mobility and mobility modes, everything from walking, bicycles, e-bikes, scooters, motor scooters, the whole spectrum beyond that, then we will realize that we can actually synthesize the kind of architecture that our cities need. This doesn't mean that we have to have very expensive solutions. India is going to be an affordability constrained economy as far as mobility is concerned. We can't, ignore that aspect of the architecture we need. But if we are imaginative and we make the right kinds of investments, right from starting with pavements and sidewalks and pedestrian crosswalks, I think we can get what we want within the affordability that a country like India has.
Thank you, Dr. Sumantran. Mr. Chenoy, I'll come to you with a question by Sanjay Gopinath, who wants to know, where do you see startups contributing more to the mobility ecosystem?
So, if I just look at how startups have already contributed to the mobility system, you have the car hailing startups, right? Which is, you have then the other startups which are not necessarily car hailing, but give you the same thing that you can go and rent a car online. You can actually do that. So one is in providing, mobility, this thing's not necessarily cars, but it's gone to two-wheelers, it's gone to three-wheelers, it has gone to even buses and public transportation, but what actually is missing is the end-to-end connectivity, right? And using multimodal and multi-different systems of transportation, so if someone can look at an algorithm, if I want to go from, one place in Pune to another place in Pune, right? What is the best way and the quickest way to get there with the least carbon footprint, right? That's one way of looking at it. Second is that if you look at, and people have actually looked at that, people have also started identifying the least carbon intensive route for any vehicle to travel, etc. There. Okay. The other aspect is if you look at the whole vehicle itself, which I had mentioned that people are disrupting, the whole vehicle servicing, maintenance things, to see how, but many of them don't have a sustainability issue inbuilt into that. So if they can, look at a sustainability issue, look at a different aspect there, that could be, done. And of course, then, how do you, can we, a lot of people have started, for example, reward points for eating out. Can someone think of something similar for reward points and incentivizing shared mobility? Currently, it has not yet been thought about. At least I've not seen it. Someone might, might be doing it, right? So there are many options. One doesn't have a patent on ideas. I think the young kids and the startups are much more intelligent and much more resourceful with us. And I think we need to actually create forums for that. They exchange ideas and they get that. The FICCI has a startup committee, and we support there. In fact, under the Millennium Alliance program and the Indian Innovation Growth Program, we fund startups on social and sustainability and mobility issues, very small grants for them off going. But I believe that it's a whiteboard. You can paint your own picture, paint your own canvas, and decide how you want to transform really planet Earth.
Thank you, Mr. Chenoy. We have almost run out of time, but I will take one last question for you, Mrs. Urdhwareshe. This is from Ashim Sharma, and he wants to know, do you see testing requirements for e-vehicles to increase, or will it decrease compared to conventional vehicles?
Yeah, it's not a question of increase or decrease. Electric vehicles do need additional testing infrastructure in terms of the batteries or motors or materials or several other aspects that go in. So it sits normally on top of the existing testing infrastructure. By no means one can claim that extreme high investments are required. There are enough testing facilities, there are enough testing infrastructure that is available. However, we should be looking at beyond as to what will get developed as a technology and getting ready for regulations such as battery recyclability. There is no infrastructure or assessment program as such for these aspects. So these are the new requirements that are coming up. Of course, we need to scale up on certain things such as material testing, um, which will be additional to what is there on the existing automotive materials. So a generation of data bank for various materials is currently, it needs support. Other than that, for the homologation, for the type approval, all the test agencies have adequately been equipped under the FAME scheme, under the earlier schemes, and enough infrastructure has been set in.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have completely run out of time, and I truly appreciate all of you giving us your time, valuable time, to be part of the launch of Mobility Outlook. Dr. Sumantran, I have a lot of questions from our delegates addressed to you. I don't know if I can send that to you later.
Certainly.
Mr. Chenoy, truly appreciate your time. Thank you for being such a great support, as always. Mrs. Urdhwareshe, truly appreciate you being here. And I look forward to your support in the future as well. Vinay Banwari, thank you as well for being part of our inaugural program. And from the entire team of Mobility Outlook, I thank each one of you for being part of this journey. Thanks very much.